Good morning, everybody. What do you like best about visiting Washington, D.C.? Well, I think for many of us, it's one of the buildings associated with the Smithsonian Institution. And it was on this date, August 10, in 1846, that Congress chartered the Smithsonian. Our country was started during the era of the Enlightenment, and one of its themes was the importance of science for general knowledge and uplifting of all people. So here's a picture of early Washington. So early on in our country's history, there was talk of a national museum or some kind of national institute, and nothing really got going, although there was an idea for a botanical garden, and that carried on, and here's the botanical garden today, not far from the Capitol. So here's James Smithson. He was born in Paris, had an English dad, moved to Britain, was pretty wealthy, very interested in chemistry and in minerals, and a really smart guy. He wrote lots of scientific papers on all kinds of things. He traveled all over Europe, and some of his papers were published by the Royal Society, so that tells you he was in pretty good company. He never married, and his will stipulated that his fortune should go to his nephew or to a new institution in Washington called the Smithsonian. So here are Smithson's remains. He was actually buried in Genoa, Italy, but then moved to the United States early on in the 1900s. So if you go to Washington today, you can see this plaque and you can see his remains. So Congress got the money, but they dithered. And they went back and forth for about 8 years on what to do with that money. But they finally got their act together. Here's President Polk, who signed the legislation on this date, August 10, in 1846, to create the Smithsonian Institution. So this is its first building. It's known as the Castle, built in 1858. Today it's offices and tourist information, but initially it held a lot of the artifacts. The next to come was the Natural History Museum. Some of its holdings were first in the castle, then it got its own building in 1911. This is the most popular of all the Smithsonian museums. The next to come was the Arts and Industries building, but this is not doing so great. It needs lots of money to be refurbished and renovated, and it's mostly unused today, although I think they use it for some things. The zoo came next in 1889. It has 2 locations, in the district and then in Virginia. Many of you have been, and the pandas, of course, are a big highlight. The next to come was the Freer Gallery of Art. This focuses on Asian art, has a little bit of American art, over 26,000 objects. And Air and Space, of course, is a big hit. Everybody loves airplanes and Lindbergh's airplane and all kinds of things, including a model of the Starship Enterprise. So that's another really popular museum. The Smithsonian has been called the attic of the country. People leave all kinds of stuff. And here's Indiana Jones' hat with his leather jacket. Just all kinds of artifacts, including a stuffed carrier pigeon. This pigeon actually took messages during World War I. It was shot down by the Germans, but rose up again to fly, delivered its message, and became a war hero. This is a heart pump made from an erector set. This is part of it. It was built in 1949, first used on a dog successfully, and many of its ideas were later applied to heart pumps for humans. And this is Julia Child's kitchen. It was moved from her house in Cambridge, Mass. to the Smithsonian. This is the kitchen where some of her cooking shows were filmed, and it's part of a big food exhibit. And this is a model of a ship that Abraham Lincoln built to show off his idea for some inflatable, kind of like balloons that would raise a ship over a sandbar. A working real one was never built, but Lincoln's model, and he got a patent for it. So here's a map of some of the Smithsonian buildings. 30 million people visit every year. It's got hundreds of millions of items spread over 19 museums, 21 libraries, and all for free.